I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee meeting today. Today is October 8th, 2014. I'm Councilmember Blong Yang, Chair of this committee. With me are Councilmember Reich, Gordon, Warsame, and Council President Johnson. Today we have 6 items on our agenda. 4 of them are consent items, and 2 others are discussion items. And I will just read them really quickly. The first one is to authorize a transfer of title of 20-foot trailers to the Minnesota counties of Iceni, Sherburne, Chisago, and Carver. And we will make a substitute motion right after I read all of this. The second item is to authorize acceptance of a grant from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety for $372,000 and to execute the 2015 Towards Zero Deaths Grant Agreement for traffic safety enforcement. Third item is to authorize a mutual aid agreement with the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, making police agency equipment, personnel, and other resources available between the police departments and cities within Hennepin County and between the police department and Hennepin County Sheriffs. The fourth item is to authorize acceptance of a grant award from the U.S. DOJ for $100,000 for planning, grant researching crime and factors in specific hotspots that may lead to crime, and to develop a cross-sector strategies to improve public safety, which requires a local match of $39,659. The fifth item is a report on administrative withdrawal of application for aid under FEMA's Public Assistance Program in relation to the June and July 2014 storm damage. And the sixth item is a staff direction, a report back to us of a staff direction on body camera test and evaluation. And with that, I'm going to start just by we were contacted by the Office of Emergency Management about one minor change to this, and so I'd like to move to substitute this new request for council action, which is in front of you for the item on item number 1 here that was originally listed. And I will just tell you what the change is. The change is just that we have an amendment to the city council action, and what's happening is that Carver County is being removed, and Iceni County is receiving 2 trailers instead of 1. And I see the Director of Emergency Management nodding his head, so I mean, that's correct, right? Okay. So anyone with any questions on that? Right. All in approval of that substitute motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so anybody want to pull anything off the consent item to discuss? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the consent items, please say aye. 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 Opposed? All right, the motion carries. And so we will get on to the discussion item. Number 1 is FEMA's Public Assistance Program, and with us here is the Director of Emergency Management, Barret Lane. Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As you will recall, in June and July of this year, we had a significant storm event that really lasted for pretty much a month. Within the span of June alone, we had record-setting rains in excess of 11 inches just in June. And then, of course, that storm pattern continued into July. As a result of the widespread damage throughout the state, there was a presidential disaster declaration that ultimately included Hennepin County. The process of receiving public assistance, and in this context, public assistance is public infrastructure assistance. This is not assistance to the general public. This is for us as the public infrastructure holders, was opened up. During the course of this, we go through and you evaluate what type of damage as an institution, as an enterprise, Minneapolis, in fact, had. And once the waters receded toward the end of August, we found that, fortunately, we only have about $6,500 worth of damage. All of that is in sidewalk repairs. Excuse me. Public Works has looked at the rest of the infrastructure that's owned by the city in the damage areas and has concluded that all of that is in good shape. So we really only have a $6,500 claim. As staff looked at this from finance, from Public Works, and from our office, the cost of staff time simply pursuing a claim of that size is going to very quickly erode whatever recovery we're able to achieve out of it. So it's our recommendation and indeed our intent to go ahead and withdraw this claim. The thing to remember is that that will not impact the Park Board's ability to pursue its claims. They have a multi-million-dollar claim associated with multiple damage elements to their infrastructure. That will proceed, nor will it impact any other institution that may have a claim related to the mudslide on West River Parkway. So all of that gets preserved. Those are already in place, but for $6,500, it seemed like this was probably one that we could let go. Nevertheless, it is a claim of value. We wanted to make sure that you were aware that we were going to do that. The claim was filed administratively. We can withdraw it administratively. No council action is necessary. So really, this is just receive and file at this point. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Any questions? All right, hearing none, we will. I will move to receive and file this action. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. All right, this sixth item is a staff direction that was moved by Councilmember Palmisano and myself with regards to the body camera test and evaluation. And I'll kind of read just the directions really quickly and then just, DC Glampe, you're here, thank you. We missed you last time, we're glad you're here. So the direction was for the MPD staff to address the following regarding the pilot study's design and scope, how the MPDA is ensuring a randomized and controlled study sample, how the MPD is measuring the success of the study, how practical and seasonal challenges unique to other study sites will be addressed, and how the study will be independently designed, reviewed, and the policy framework initiatives related to this. And DC Glampe, if you can go ahead, that'd be great.
Thank you, Councilmember Yang. So to make sure we're all on the same page on this, the study we're doing, if we can call it that, the study we're doing is around ultimately what equipment we're going to implement department-wide and what the policy is going to be around that. I want to make sure we're not talking about a study that is going to look at the effects of body cameras on complaints, behavior, that sort of thing. That's not what our part of the pilot project and study is about. We are about evaluating the equipment during this test phase and then ultimately making the final recommendation to the full council as to what we want to purchase and what we need to fully implement this to the entire department, hopefully a year from now. So with that being said, there is really no measure of success for the study. The success will be whether or not we are able to come to a conclusion on a particular piece of equipment. We've chosen two to test. We are confident one of those two are going to be one of the two best products that ultimately one of them will be chosen by the department. The practical seasonal challenges unique to other study sites to be addressed. We're a cold weather climate. We understand that we have our partners down in Burnsville. They're not Minneapolis police. They do things differently than we do. They don't do them better. They don't do them worse. We do things differently than each other as departments. When we're talking about implementation of upwards of 500 to 800 people in this department, we have unique objectives we have to look at when we're studying these things. Certainly in cold weather, we have to find out how these things work with gloves on. When your hands are cold and numb, how do these body cameras work? With winter clothing, we look at winter clothing, and if you wear a chest-mounted camera that sits right in the middle of your uniform, what happens when you have a tie on? What happens when you put a jacket on because all of a sudden in the fall the weather gets cold? What if it starts to rain? These are the things that we are looking to measure when it comes to seasonal changes in regards to this equipment that's unique. And we talked earlier, at least I did when I presented to the committee, Ways and Means, about one of the items we're testing is the glasses. One of the mounts that TASER provides is it mounts on a pair of glasses, either sunglasses or clear lenses, that gives the user, every time they turn their head, the camera will follow. Well, those glasses are great, except on a day like today when it's sunny out, you walk inside and you have to take your sunglasses off. Well, suddenly that same camera that was pointing straight ahead with your line of vision is now pointing up at the ceiling. In the winter, when you walk inside and those things fog up, we can't have people walking around with fogged up glasses. We look at things such as battery life. The battery life on one of these cameras is going to be a lot different in Minnesota at 20 below than it certainly is in Phoenix at a nice comfortable 70 or 80 degrees. We have to find out how that works in our environment. Because again, when we look at a place like Burnsville, or Duluth is now just getting in the game, they can't provide us with any info. We know our officers are exposed to many different and more advanced scenarios. Standing outside at a homicide scene in below zero weather is not something our partners do a lot. We tend to have to guard those scenes, be outdoors in that inclement weather a lot more. Those are the things we want to look at. And quite honestly, one of the things that's going to be unique for the products we're testing is we're going to be one of the northernmost major police departments that either one of these companies is going to have experienced. So in a way, we're going to be providing them with a lot of data as well. As far as independent design and review, the way we are doing this is we are going to seek input from the officers involved through a series of, right now, I would anticipate surveys where we're going to ask them every question we possibly can, from tell us about officer safety, how did these things work? Was it easy to work with gloves? How did you feel? Did you feel differently? Did you change your behavior when you use these things? We're going to sit down after probably halfway through and again at the end of each evolution of the cameras and talk to them. So when we come back to you, we have the greatest set of data possible to tell you this is why we're choosing this product and why. And then the policy framework. What we've done is we've sat down with, in speaking with both the Police Officers Federation, officers involved, the City Attorney's Office, and we've come up with a framework for a policy. We're going to be doing a standard operating procedure, SOP, during the test phase. It's much easier to do an SOP because we can change it instantly. We can make appropriate testing changes if we want to test the way we use it, such as whether or not the camera will be wearing while officers work off-duty jobs. We can make those changes midway through, plan ahead. And so the things, this is what we're going to use for our criteria. Our outline will be definition of purpose. Why are we using these things? Definition of general terms, i.e. just regular definitions, officer responsibilities, supervisor's responsibilities, restrictions, activation, deactivation, how officers categorize video when they're through, which will affect the retention schedule, access to videos, who gets to see these things, who gets to manipulate these things as far as editing, and then data practice considerations. And that's a big one for us because quite honestly, it's an unknown. We don't know what the data practice requests are going to be, and that is going to be a huge unknown factor at this point, because when you start talking about editing things out, it's going to be time consuming, it's going to require personnel, and one of the things that I want to be able to report back to you on 7, 8, 9, 10 months from now when we report back is what we're going to need for personnel to keep up with these things, because again, our partners in the state that have these things don't see the amount of data requests, nor do they generate the amount of video we do. And it's going to take some extra personnel, even if you're talking about something like the City Attorney's Office, who's potentially going to need somebody to view these videos for their own purpose when they're doing investigations. These are the considerations we want to make sure we capture during this test period, so we're not implementing it and going, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you about this. So hence, this is what our purpose during all of this is. We want to be able to give a comprehensive cost for everything we need, from the most basic camera all the way up to potentially needing an extra video technician, an extra data practice specialist, all those sort of things we want to make sure we capture during this study. A couple of the other things that I just wanted to go over, and then certainly take any feedback you have. When we talk, some of the criteria or qualities we're going to be looking at, video quality. We talked about this taser mount on the glasses. It gives a great shot of where the officer's looking. If they move their head, it's going to follow. But I will tell you, If you watch that thing in any sort of situation that's dynamic, you will get nauseous, because if you think about every time somebody moves their head, that camera is going back and forth rapidly. It's a great idea. In theory, you would think you'd get the best view, but sometimes that's not the best view. We want to be able to look at that sort of thing and report back and say, the quality of this video is not as good as maybe the one that mounts on the lapel or the one that mounts on the chest. We'll find out through this testing. Talk about user friendliness. One comes with a cord. If you're going to mount something on a pair of glasses, you have to have a cord to a battery pack. That cord gets in the way. It's something that can be grabbed. It's something else that can break. We want to test those things. Ease of application. If it takes 20 minutes to mount this thing on your clothing, maybe it's something we don't want. If it constantly falls off or gets in the way on your glass, maybe it's something we don't want. That's the feedback, again, we want from our officers. Comfort. How does it fit with a bullet-resistant vest? For instance, a lot of our officers wear outer vest carriers. They're not built the same way our shirts are. It takes a special adapter to hold these cameras, and we don't have partners that have the same clothing that can tell us how these things work. And then just talking about the back end, downloading. How difficult is it to download these things? Editing. The folks in our crime lab are going to have to edit. How difficult is it for them to edit? That's going to be a big piece when you're talking about the potential of having to at least a 2-to-1 ratio. For every hour of live time video, it takes at least 2 hours to do editing and redaction, if not more, on a complicated video. And then again, we talk about charging along with downloading. How easy is it for the officers? Is it as simple as dropping it in the docking station and coming back the next day and they're all set to go? Those are things we want to be able to fully investigate so that we're investing our money properly when everything's said and done. So with that, I'd be happy to take any feedback.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Glampe, just in this mode, I know our legislature last session was unable to come to an agreement about how long data on license plate readers was to be kept. With the information on these body cams, is there any state law that governs any aspect of the use of them?
Council President Johnson, currently we follow the city's data retention policy, which is approved by the Commissioner of Administration over at the state. It's our position that we are going to follow whatever the Chiefs of Police Association recommends. We want to be part of the big group there. Whatever's good for Burnsville when it comes to retention period and storage, that's what we want to do. Same with we want to be part of one. So essentially, there's no specific state law, but we have no specific agenda on that matter. Whatever the law is what we want to follow. Mm-hmm. And right now, it's going to be the same as our squad video. And I should say also as part of that, we're trying to model our policy or our SOP after our squad video policy because our officers know that, and it actually translates pretty well. So we're trying to follow that, where if it's a nothing event, we keep it for 90 days. If it's a citation or an arrest, we would keep it maybe up to a year. That we have set data retention that comes from the city clerk's office.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Chief Glampe, can you just go into a little more detail? I think I got half of my answer from your last comment, but how will data practices work within this pilot timeframe? I've been to your crime lab. It doesn't seem like you're at all staffed for that. It also seems like any editing of this kind of video would just be viewed as suspicious by the nature of what an open data practices request might be. So can you help us understand how an open data request would work during its pilot phase?
Absolutely. So again, it would differ. It would not differ at all from any other video the city maintains, such as our safe zone video or our squad video. The thought being, if we get a data request, we would fulfill that within the boundaries of whatever the state law requires us to do. In this particular, let's say, for instance, we have video that has a juvenile in it. We have a couple different options for redaction. You can either cut the frame by frame out, or you can fuzz it out. Either way, we would provide an explanation of why we edited. We're required to provide an explanation under any data why we redact something. We can't give you that information because, and then we have to be very specific to state law, because if it reveals a victim of crime or a juvenile, or maybe it's somebody in maybe it's a naked body, for instance, we would either fuzz it out or completely just chop that part out. And we would be open about it, still maintaining the raw video. So it's not like we're just completely chopping it up, getting rid of it forever. We would still have that, if a court ordered us to view it or anything like that. And as far as and that's one of the things we want to find out, how much do we really need from our crime lab as far as personnel goes? We want their input on what they need. Do we need a full certified video forensics person, or do we need a video technician? Much lower grade, doesn't require as much certification. So those are the things we want to find out as we go forward, so we're properly staffing at the proper budget, so to speak. So.
I know that the current people in the crime lab that do this kind of work have some of the top certifications in the country. So thank you for that explanation.
Any other questions? DC Glampe, I have a couple of questions. I know this might be a little bit further out, but at a crime scene where there are, let's say, 5 or 6 different officers and they all have body cams, I mean, are they all live, all of them, all 6 of them, or are we thinking about maybe like cutting it down to 2, or what are your thoughts on that?
So that's one of the places where we're going to have to give officers discretion. If they're standing on a post of a homicide, basically guarding a post, and they have no expectation of any negative contact with anybody, we don't want to spend that storage cost on just having them there for a couple hours, or if they're sitting in their squad guarding a fire hose or downed electrical line. So that's one of the things we're going to ask each individual officer to make that decision, and that will be part of the training. Hey, here's where you can and should deactivate your camera. As far as numbers go, all officers, if you're required to activate that camera at a certain point, that's when you will also need to make that consideration later down the line. And that may be where we train our supervisors. Hey, the crime scene is it's stabilized. Let's go around and do some data space management. We don't have anything else going on. So that is absolutely a consideration we will have. But the thing we want to avoid is an incident happens where maybe 2 officers use force against somebody, 2 other officers just happen to arrive. We don't want everybody to go, well, 2 of you had your cameras going, oh, I thought you did. No, we want the expectation. Everybody turns their cameras on when it's required, and then we can step back and make the decision about deactivating them once everything has been stabilized. Okay.
And the officers who have agreed to be in the pilots from the 3 different precincts, I don't want to say who are they, but I want to say, did they volunteer, and are they, in the different shifts, or, what's the composite there?
Absolutely. We specifically asked for a split between all the shifts. We wanted some on days, some on nights, and a supervisor somewhere in the precinct, because supervisors are going to have a little bit different look. So absolutely, not only did we choose the 1st, the 4th, and the 5th precincts due to the diversity and the call load and the casework they're going to get, but then we also broke it down further and said we know stuff in the day is different at night. Not only the video quality that the cameras, but certainly the contact they're going to have, the difference in calls. So absolutely, that's something we absolutely wanted from our volunteers going forward. And the officers are volunteers, right? They voluntarily said, I want to be a part of it, right? Yes. Okay. And the one thing I will say about those officers is, when I saw the list, I was very pleased that it was officers that we know are going to utilize the video. A number of them are hardworking officers, so my fear was we were going to get officers coming forward that we were going to really have to work to get the video. These are going to be the officers that I guarantee you some of these and would say these officers are hard workers and the very people you would want wearing them. They're going to give us the data we're looking for. Okay. And so
You were talking about different jurisdictions, Burnsville, possibly Duluth, and maybe Phoenix and those places, but I heard that you were up in Calgary 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And what's their experience up there? Because I mean, I imagine they're colder than us, and they've had these issues. And my understanding is that they have launched this program about a year earlier than us. And so my guess is one reason why you're there was to learn from them. But I mean, the other was probably just because I mean, they're doing it. I mean, you get a chance to see live what they're doing. How's that?
First of all, fascinating conference. I learned a lot. I mean, to listen to the experience of a number of agencies, including American agencies and the British. I mean, I learned a lot from the Brits when they presented. The one thing about Calgary, at the risk of speaking for them, but I will based on what I learned, they chose one model to test. It was the same as their squad video. They got through with their test period and uniformly said, "We don't like this camera," because they put all their eggs in the basket of their squad camera. So now they are stuck trying to convince the people that are going to, approve these things of picking a camera that they have no experience with. So their choice is to go blindly with another camera based on recommendation or to redo their test period. That's where I feel confident that we've been able to do this right in the choices that we've made. And actually, I've heard from a number of companies. There seems to be a prevailing manufacturer that the Canadians use across the country, and they've shared the same thing. They're not pleased with that particular product that they chose. So I was very happy to hear that in the regard. I feel bad for them because they wasted a lot of time on that part of it, but I feel good that we've done this right in how we've made our selections up to this point and how we propose to move forward.
And what were the issues with the model and make that they were having problems with? I mean, was it just that, it was fogging up? I mean, all these other issues, or what was going on?
It was clumsy to use, difficult in cold weather. One of the complaints, and go figure, in Canada, they couldn't use it with gloves. It was very difficult to turn on and off. The wires snapped, and that's one of the things we heard about earlier. One of the ones we chose, we heard some complaints about one of the earlier generations. The wires were not very strong. Now they've lived and learned, and they're putting out a really good product in that regard. That's what they were reporting to us, is that they were having great difficulties in just that cold weather operation, physically turning the darn thing on. Well, I'm sorry, if you can't turn it on, the battery life is not a big deal if you can't get it to work manually. Right.
And so, we have 2 makes and at least 4 models, my understanding of it.
Yes.
Okay. And so, with those 4 different models, I mean, you feel confident that we'll find a model and make that we'll like then, right?
Absolutely. I would be shocked if we came up and said, you know what, we're going completely outside of these 2 manufacturers or these 3 models. I would be shocked. On the length of time it's taken to get us this far with the city purchasing process, which in the end, I guess it's good because that's what's caused us to have this confidence. If it's not one of these products, and especially based on how they've operated in other cities, I think we're going to get one of these 2 products.
And have the Canadians found a make and model that they like?
Calgary, we're going to be, they haven't even started the next process of fully implementing. They're still researching what they're going to do. So no, they haven't. Nobody's come forward specifically saying this is the direction we're going to go. I know Toronto is where we're at now. Toronto is going to go forward. So what the 3rd biggest city, it's either the 3rd or 4th biggest city in North America is right where we're at too. So I'd be interested to see what they end up doing, and I think they've learned from what they heard from their counterparts up there.
Okay. Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you, and I appreciate the presentation. I was curious if you're reviewing the policies with our Police Conduct Overview or Oversight Commission, PCOC, I think I have the name right, because I think their input might be valuable in looking at this and hearing about the squad cameras. And I also know we have tape recorders in our squad cars, and sometimes there are instances where we wish there was evidence from those and there isn't. And so want to make sure those policies are right so that we get what we need with our body cameras too.
Yeah, very timely in your question. I met with Mr. Brown yesterday, Michael Brown from OPCR. And what we're going to do, and it's in his hands already, we've provided that same policy framework that I mentioned to you, the same outline is provided to the PCOC along with our squad video policy. Our thought being is we want them, rather than give us a negative feedback on our proposed SOP, we want to get their positive input to start out with. And what we're going to do is present to them in December. We talked to him. They may not even know it yet as a board because I'm sure they haven't gotten that feedback. But the plan is to meet with them in December, present exactly where we're at with the cameras being out in the streets, any quick feedback that we've seen in that month, and then February, we're going to go sit down with them and have a discussion on what exactly is our SOP and get their input at that point. The biggest thing then is as we go forward for full implementation and an actual policy, they will have absolute ample ability to give us their input on what they'd like to see. And as far as the squad car things go, it brings up a really good point. We have squad video. It is our intent, and from what we've heard from other places, is we are going to have our officers activate both their squad cameras and their body cam videos, because if there's malfunctions, the squad cameras are meant to see out the window, capture things, the traffic violation 30 seconds ahead. If an officer's wearing a camera right here, all you may see is the steering wheel until they get out of the car. Now you come back down, sit in the car, you have 2 audio recorders getting those spontaneous admissions or any kind of evidence. So we've definitely thought about that, and it's going to be an absolute, you're going to activate both. Some places have gone to getting rid of their squad video. We're not ready to do that yet. We're going to see how this works first, and maybe somewhere down the line, that is a cost savings to us. But also a number of agencies have found they've kept both systems just because of the evidentiary value they get. The other thing being that our squad video right now also captures things in the back seat of the squad. Unless you've turned around, you're not going to have that camera. So it is, we've thought about that as we move forward.
And just to clarify, so is the policy then, whenever you have somebody in the back of your vehicle, you should have your squad cam, at least the audio function, going the entire time?
Right now, it's not. It would only be predicated on if it were because of a traffic stop, where our body camera policy or SOP would be different. It would be more general, including things like if you take enforcement action against a person, whether in a car or walking down the street, and they go in the back of your squad, you would have that on already, so you would be able to glean that information on video.
And so you would leave it on the entire time you're transporting the person in the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. I think that would be good. I've been at least part of one settlement conference where definitely a whole part was missing, and it created problems for figuring out what actually happened, because you heard some audio and some discussions going on, and all of a sudden it was off, and so that gave the opportunity for people to make different claims about what was said and what wasn't said. And so that's one of the benefits, I think, about having this kind of technology, is then we have a third source to go to. We'll have all the witnesses that were involved in an incident, but then we'll at least have some other evidence to weigh.
Absolutely. It's a lot like our safe zone cameras. A lot of times we have to prove the negative. We have to present a camera that shows absolutely nothing happened at the intersection, but you know what? It showed absolutely nothing happened, and that's what it takes sometimes to clear things. If that's what these end up doing, it's going to be difficult, because I think you and I are both, we know we sat together on that settlement conference. You won't be able to show that settlement, what happened at that settlement conference, when in fact the lawsuit never happened, but at some point when we see the reduction, I think some of that will speak to how we use our policy and have those things running. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Chief Glampe, you and I have talked about this, in general over the past few months, and I fully understand here that this is about a test of equipment. I'm really interested in evaluating the effectiveness of police body cameras, and I think that's a bigger, different kind of pilot and study. The changing of behavior as evaluated by officers is valuable, and I like the standard operating procedures work being done. It seems really holistic and well thought out. This is a huge amount of money to spend on implementation, and I feel like we need to know that it's more than just media friendly right now. Like, I'm looking to find ways that we can try and evaluate to see if it builds trust. I mean, we should know, and we've been talking about, it doesn't quite give a complete picture of a difficult situation, but it gives a better picture than what we've had to date. I continue to have concerns around this. I know that youth street workers have expressed concerns to me about this. I think the general public needs to know this is going to increase the effectiveness and the behavior all around. And I'm supportive of implementation in a way that will enhance trust, not make officers seem more robotic or less human. And I'm concerned about a lessened ability for authentic conversations and confiding. I mean, I know of my own self-consciousness when I'm here in the room on a camera, and I can only imagine what that would be like when you catch somebody in a difficult situation. So what is your take on the trade journals and I've read a few, I'm sure you've read a lot more, you have a lot more skills in this area. What is your take on the trade journals review of increasing the effectiveness and the trust in communities because of body cameras, like long term? And then how do you plan to address sensitive situations such as somebody outing gang member activity or going into a domestic where you're going to be talking to victims? Like how will you address things like that? Is that discretionary based on the police officer, or can you just help me understand that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I'll try and break it down. Unfortunately, fortunately, a lot of the studies have been done, like you say, in the trade journals, and I think the evidence is overwhelming that communities that use these things see a decrease in complaints. I'm more worried about the substance of the complaint, but we know they're going to go down if these things are used right. We see an increase in conviction. This is great evidence. The problem with where we're at now is, I would have to defer to experts, because when you start talking statistics and studies, they can be very scientific. But when we're looking at only 36 people out of a potential 800 department member force, I think it's going to be difficult or potentially could be difficult for us to do that study right now. That's something we may have to look down the line. We would either have to trust those trade journals and compare what we end up doing a year from now, 2 years from now, when we have full implementation. But then to take it a step further, and that is one of the biggest debates right now in implementation of body cameras, is privacy concerns. Depending on where you land, it's either you turn the camera on and leave it going the whole time, you have no discretion to turn it off, to you should not be using it in situations that are sensitive, whether it be domestic assaults and whatnot. What we're leaning towards and what we're going to teach and train the officers is that if you expect to take enforcement action or have a negative contact, i.e. if you're being called inside a house to arrest somebody for domestic assault, the camera needs to be on, because you are going to have negative interaction with that person. Furthermore, we're going to ask them, when at all possible, to take a statement on that camera. That is compelling, powerful evidence that is going to allow us to get those convictions, those difficult convictions. And we all know of the stories of a victim one day recants the next, and our case goes down. We're going to use that as a tool when we can. When it's going to hinder getting that truthful statement, officers will have the discretion to turn it off. They'll have to note why they turned it off, but when they can feel it, this statement is not going to happen. I watched a video. They sent it to me from the UK, and it's so powerful. This woman with 2 battered eyes on camera, who every time the police would show up, the husband would say, no, she doesn't want to talk to you, and it was the end of the story. The conviction on this, they got a conviction because of this video. These are the success stories we're looking for. We are fully aware that those situations are going to exist, and that's where we're going to have to invest the time and energy on the back end in doing the redactions when we get the public data requests. When somebody outs a gang member, when somebody doesn't want to talk to us because the camera's on, officers will be given the discretion to turn it off. And then to speak to the whole robotic, how are officers going to behave? It's going to be a training tool. Personally, I would like to think if I have this thing on, I'm going to step it up in the friendliness a notch. I'm going to be almost, over friendly to the person because I know I have this camera on. I hope that the true reaction to officers is that they bring it to a level that is pleasant, friendly, and they have a conversation the way they should have it, regardless of the cameras there. And if the camera being on them takes them from a level down here up to that level we're looking for, great. That's exactly what we're looking for in the cameras. But if it takes them to that level where, hold it, stop trying to be robotic. We'll work with them. And that's one of the things we'll look at when we look at these videos. If officers are having problems, we'll seek their input of how we can bring them back to that level, because we don't want them to be, we want it to be natural. We want that camera to be natural to them. And it's going to take a little bit of time, but we saw that with the squad cameras too, where it took a while, but pretty soon they became used to it. And it's a training issue that we're going to deal with, because yeah, we want officers to, we want them to modify or keep their behavior so it is at that level that's expected by you, me, everybody in the city. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that, and quite honestly, that's what the studies tell us, is that officers do, they make an effort based on the cameras. So we'll hope those studies hold true with us.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I will move to receive and file this verbal report. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we're done with our business here, so I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.